All right. I hope you're doing well, students. And I have been getting, I saw some of your assignments earlier that some of you have submitted already about factory life, which we'll be discussing more next week. So next week, I'll be giving all of you um, an invite to Zoom, which we'll more than likely be using to have a live discussion about um, the AP exam, but also how you're doing, and then also some of the logistical information that we need to talk about. But today I want to talk a little bit more about child labor photographs, and specifically, this is a document from Lewis Hines and some photography that he did. So this document is pretty straightforward. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking a look at um, specifically photographs from the early 20th century of children who used to work in factories. And this is a really good side by side comparison to the document that you read last week, which was Factory Life. But this one really does focus in on what it actually looked like. And I think it's very unique that we have photographs. And next week, I'll be talking more about the AP exam, and one of the sources that you'll get will be a non-textual source. So it might be a photograph, it might be a line graph, it might be something that's not like a traditional kind of source that you're probably used to looking at. So this is really actually a good activity to do before the exam. So the central historical question for this document is what were working conditions like for children in coal mines in the early 20th century? I laid out some very specific instructions throughout the document. So, for example, here it says directions. Below, you will be analyzing photographs from Louis Hines, who was a photographer. First, watch the 2 YouTube video clips and answer the questions in the yellow boxes. So, you want to click on the link here. It's about a 4.5 minute video clip that explains how photography came to be about. Obviously, it does have a time period in the beginning. And then once you have watched it, then I would suggest that you go about answering the questions that are here. They do go in specifically in this order. When you click on the link that's here, you want to make sure that you, as you're watching it, that you also turn on the subtitles, which is here. I would also suggest you pause when you're watching it. That way you could definitely see some of the parts you may have missed. And again, they do go into specifically in this order. From there, you want to take a look at the next video. And I would suggest you watch about like the first minute. It's only about a minute. It's only about like two minutes, but you just really need to watch the first minute. And then from there, to answer the 2 questions here. These 2 questions relate specifically to magnesium flash powder, which is something that photographers used in the place of flash photography. They had to mix these different chemicals together or powders together, and that would create this um, this light, flash or this light that would result as a combination of these different chemicals. And it talks more about that in the video, so you want to make sure you watch that. And then from there, you get some background on the photographer, who is Lewis Hines. You want to read through this. Notice that I have highlighted some parts that are important. And then from there, you want to go ahead and answer the 4 questions that are here. And then here in this green box, it has some questions you should be asking yourself as you are analyzing photographs. So, for example, you should be asking yourself, when and where was this photograph taken? Who took the photograph? What was their perspective on the event of people being photographed, and how might that have influenced what they chose to shoot? Why was this photograph taken? Does the photographer have an incentive or motive to portray the scene in a particular way? So thinking about like, okay, does this person work for an organization? Are they a journalist? Is this like a random person who's walking down the street and just taking photographs? Or does this person have, like, is that their job? Like, are they a professional photographer? You might even say. Under what circumstances was a photograph taken? How might these circumstances have limited or enabled the photographer, uh, enabled what the photographer was able to capture? So there's obviously like certain limitations, especially with early photography, as you'll learn about them here. Some of the ones that Lewis Hines was encountering as he was taking photographs. So you want to think about that, and then also think about the technology, right? So how does the technology shape what we're taking a look at? Um, so these are just questions to keep in mind. You don't need to answer these questions. This is just there as reference. And keep in mind, an easy way to remember this is thinking about really the 5 W's, right? Who, what, when, where, and why. And this is one way, but a more specific way to think about photography. So these are the kinds of questions you should be thinking about as you are reading some of these photographs. The first photograph here is a photograph from titled Breaker Boys. Down here you have some sourcing information. So it's taken in South Pittston, Pennsylvania. So it's a state in the East Coast. Pennsylvania was a large industrial state with like iron mills as well as iron factories. But in this case, you have a coal mine that it's focusing on, and it's also a name of photographer, the date January 1911, and then the title Breaker Boys in Ewan Breaker of Pennsylvania Coal Company. So this one's telling us that it's specifically this company named Ewan Breaker of Pennsylvania Coal Company. It gives us some more context over here in the top. So the following photograph shows a group of breaker boys who were employed at a coal mine in northeastern Pennsylvania. The job of a breaker boy was to separate rocks and minerals from coal that had just been mined from the ground, and they would typically use their bare hands to pick rocks from the coal. So here we have a photograph, right? And you should really just before you even answer the questions, think about just the photograph and think about what you're looking at and just try to identify things that you're identifying. So here, for example, I see maybe some kind of rails underneath. So this might be like where a train or maybe some kind of wagon. This back here looks like maybe the entrance to the coal mine. I see lots of boys. I don't see any girls. I see this probably older gentleman. I'm not sure why he's here, but definitely another older gentleman here back here. There looks like maybe there's a few other back here, but a large frontal part of this. You have all these boys right here. So keeping in mind that this is a stage photograph, so that means like Lewis Hines would have asked these boys if he could take a picture, and more than likely they willingly, like yeah, like we'll take a photograph, and they are all showing up here, right? So notice how young they are, right? So these, thinking about the ages of some of these children, right? You might have younger siblings, or you may have just seen children. So I would say many of these boys are between the ages of maybe 6 to probably about 9. So they're really, really fairly young. Many of them are wearing some kind of gear. Looks like they have shoes, many layers, right? Probably because of the cold. This young boy right here is wearing overalls. So you want to be able to try to identify as many things as possible that you're looking at here. And notice that some of these boys do have gloves. It looks like, except for this guy over here doesn't have gloves. But yeah, but you want to try to be able to identify as many details as possible from the photographs that you're looking at. And then you can start taking a look at the questions. So there's only 2 questions. There's 2 questions for this source, but also just for the rest of the sources. There's a total of 4 photographs. So you want to take some time to just really think about the photograph. The questions are just really there to supplement your thinking about, or to really help guide your thinking about some of these photographs. So what details do you notice about the photographs? So the boys are probably the ages of 6 to 12. So many are wearing overalls and hats, and they're all wearing shoes, just important, right? And then the second question is asking you, what does this photograph suggest about what work was like for children in the Pennsylvania coal mines in 1910 and 1911? Cite specific details from the photograph to support your claim. So for this one, it's asking us to do 2 things. First of all, it's asking us to think about this photograph and how does this photograph connect to the actual conditions of what it was like to work in the factories. And then it's also asking us to support that claim by by identifying very specific things in this photograph that support that idea. So the first thing we need to do is come up with some kind of claim, right? So the claim that it should be pretty obvious, right? So all the children here look really, really young, right? And that's not something that they should be doing, especially if they're really young, right? Today, this would be, a criminal offense, right? And negligence on the part of parents for allowing them to work, and then also negligence on the part of the company for allowing them to work. But this was a very normal thing for a lot of children, right, who at a very young age were expected to work. So the claim is children who were really young worked in mines under dangerous conditions. And again, we know that this is dangerous because a coal mine is not a place where children should be. So that's our claim. And then the second part of that, we need to back that up with some kind of evidence, right? So so this photograph shows a group of about 20 boys between the ages of 6 and 12, and many have coal ash on their faces. So again, we're using very specific details to support that claim to back that up. Up next, you're going to take a look at document B, which is the Pennsylvania breaker. This photograph right here gives you some more detail about what breaker boys actually do. So they would be sitting here, right, and the coal would literally pass underneath them, and they would literally be sorting out with their hands and throwing out to the sides, right, any kind of material or iron or that would get sometimes trapped with a coal, right? And they would be able to notice that by taking a look at what's underneath them, and if it's not black, if it looks a different color, they would be able to sort that out. And then you have a photograph from Arthur Harvard, which is here, and these are drivers. So the drivers normally would be the ones pushing either the wagons, the metal wagons, or sometimes pushing also mule carts. So they would normally be doing something like this. And then from there, you have here photograph D, you have actually of what the drivers are doing. So notice that this guy over here is driving a mule. So the mule will be pushing the cart. This one over here is actually like an engine. So it's a machinery that's like a steam engine, right? Especially like that's pushing the carts out. So these would be the mule drivers. So you want to, again, go through the sources B, C, and D, and then answer the questions. And then from there, you want to take a look at the closing reflection questions that are here, which is basically to get you to think about, like, okay, like, what is this? What is the bigger picture about industrial life or the Industrial Revolution, and what effect did it have? And so far, we've taken a look at some very negative consequences of the Industrial Revolution, like children working or children getting injured in factories or things like that. But we're going to take a look at some positives as well in the coming weeks. Okay, so you want to make sure that you go through the document, that you have answered the questions. And then again, if you have any questions, please feel free to call or text me or send me an email, and then I'll respond to you as soon as I can. All right. Again, next week I'll be sending all of you an invite to Zoom, and then hopefully sometime later this week I'll also be sending maybe a quick YouTube video clip of a presentation that I'll be doing about the AP exam and some more details to follow on that. All right, and that's it for today.